In your groups, you get to choose your own groups, but you also choose your own facilitator. I do have starter questions for you. You don't have to just answer these questions because it's a topic that you're choosing that you're interested in. So if you want to take it a different direction, that's great, okay? But you will, within your group, you will need to choose a facilitator to kind of ask the questions, drive the direction of the conversation. You will need to have a note taker, like we did yesterday, and you will have to have someone who is willing to report on what your group talked about. Topics are impact to natural systems, water body management, and that includes stream flow, local expectations, and agriculture water. Let's start right here with this first group. This was the natural systems group, and who is your reporter?
So we encapsulated it basically that comes down to it doesn't matter because climate change is going to warm everything, and then we're all going to die. Notice the ag group doesn't think this is funny at all. We kind of knew this was the case when we said this. Yeah, and then Seth wanted to change the water right rules, so you might want to talk to him later on too. So,
Sure, throw me under the bus.
sorry. So you know what was interesting about this conversation is we're just the natural world over here with regard to drought and what happens. And it was early on in the conversation. Tom was showing how they have to release water for people for M&I and different uses, but they have to keep minimum stream flows for the June sucker fish. And our point was that encapsulates the whole argument right there. Because you have, when there's a lot of water, everybody is fine. The June sucker's fine, the natural world is fine, everybody's okay. But when it gets short and it gets low, then you have to start taking away. And the first part of this gets taken away is the natural process, is the natural world. And people will be angry with that. But what do you do in essence? Do you take it from people's homes? Do you let landscapes dry up and all that money goes away? And his group, Tom especially, has to make these decisions. Do we take it from the fish? Do we take it from the wildlife, the forests, these kinds of things? And these are really hard decisions. And really, this encapsulates the argument of what's going on when we have drought conditions. And we went into a lot of other different things on this, on how this works. What else are we going to do? How are we going to deal with the bark beetle infestations when the forest gets stressed due to drought? And then the trees die, and then we have wildfire come through that kind of screws up a lot of the infrastructure that you have for the water supplies. That's a problem. And it's all interconnected. But essentially what is taken first is the natural world. The June sucker is going to get shorted. And that's just a reality. And really when you think of all the different areas of the desert Southwest Utah, when it gets dry, somebody's going to get shorted. And what do we do about it? And then that was the next part of our discussion of we have this meeting with all this great ideas and a lot of talented people. What do we do when it gets dry? How do we fix it? Well, you can't fix it. You can't make it rain. So what do we do about it? And that was kind of a quandary. And that's what I was thinking when I attended this meeting. It's like, what are we doing for the end result of this? What are we here for? Are we going to fix drought? Well, we can't really fix drought. Do we plan for it? Do we mitigate? And that discussion, I think, was the biggest part of our discussion as to what do we do when it turns to drought conditions, to really bad, serious drought. Do the water rights work? Do we have the rigidity of our laws? Do they work in the future when this gets drier? We don't know. We didn't have a good discussion. Anything else I missed?
We talked about recreation.
Oh, yeah.
Ski industry, other things, water banking. It's great.
Yeah.
Lake, of course.
Right. So we were trying to come up with a number. This is just from my memory. The ski industry brings about $3.5 billion. So when we have drought, do the ski industries take it and make snow, or is that kind of silly? because we're in such dire straits, but yet you have this economic gain of the ski industry and the recreation industry. You know, do we take money, do we take water from the ski industry? That kind of thing.
Or conversely, that water is being taken from culinary use.
Right? So it's kind of a circular argument on this. It isn't just clear cut. We just leave these people behind. We move forward. Everybody's affected by this. So how do we get around this? We talked about cloud seeding, whether that works or not. There was some discussion on that. Anything else I missed?
Oh, we talked about the Great Salt Lake a fair bit and just the environmental impacts
Right.
of that system and the value of keeping water going to the Great Salt Lake.
Right.
So there's wildlife impacts, there's air quality and human health impacts, and there's also an economic impact. I believe Great Salt Lake provides somewhere around $1 billion to the economy, all told.
Yeah.
How about,
Yeah, sorry.
we talked about conservation pools and in-stream water rights. We talked about in our group about conservation pools and in-stream water rights. Maybe those are some mitigation tools that you could use for the natural system during drought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of good discussion, a lot of good ideas, but when it comes to crunch time, somebody's going to get shorted. A group will get shorted. And the natural world will most likely get shorted first. And, you know, that's just reality. That's just kind of how it goes. Depending on how bad the drought gets. If we have some of those historic droughts you read about that are really phenomenally long, you know, maybe we won't be worrying about the June sucker at all when we're trying to get through this. So.
This group, local interests, expectations. Who's your reporter?
We had some really great discussion, I thought. You know, we started kind of bantering these questions kind of back and forth, and like I said, we just kind of made it what we wanted. We talked about the best way to determine what the expectations are. We talked about how there should be two-way communication, how it shouldn't just come from the top down. We talked about there should be stakeholder meetings, specifically what do we want to do with the plan? How does the local systems, water suppliers, and conservancy districts want to engage in the plan and get out of it? How do you add ideas to the drought plan, and what are some common expectations? So we did have a great discussion on how maybe in the past, if a plan was given, that there wasn't enough time to review the plan, and then comments weren't necessarily, if they were given, they weren't responded to, and so maybe a person didn't know whether their comments were heard or not. So to be better about addressing comments and saying how we've used them. Then we had a great discussion, I thought, on how to involve stakeholder groups from the staff level up, rather than just going to upper management or just board members or just city councils to talk about, you know, really it's the staff that is the core support of all those entities. And so how do we engage with the staff level at some point to get their feedback? And then we also talked about other ways we can get information out, like going to rural water users, AWWA, soil conservation districts, kind of using unconventional ways, which maybe aren't as unconventional now, but social media, those type of things, League of City of Towns, watershed symposiums, and just trying to get the message out too. And we talked about, you know, the drought plan that we're trying to update, but also our state water planning efforts, and how do we kind of get this overarching message out. So that's kind of were some of my big takeaways. We also got into how to address drought from like the system level. Like, it's not always lawn, I think it was really well said, lawn is not the culprit. You know, there are different varieties of lawn that use less water, and you don't want to eliminate part of your audience that are going to have lawn regardless. So if you can get them to translate or transfer to more water-wise lawn, you want them to do that, not just exclude them from the conservation discussion. So I thought that was really interesting as well. I might wrap it up there unless you guys want to bring out anything specific that I missed.
Okay, my group back here that was water, yes. Water systems, yeah, whatever it was, you know what it was.
Yeah. We also had a great discussion. We talked a lot about the issues that we're facing are related to water rights and water rights law, and that it kind of binds our hands from thinking outside the box and thinking of some new ways to better manage deliveries. We also have a wide variety of storage across the state. We heard from Weber Basin, who has annual storage, and then central Utah, we have storage that might last up to 9 years. So it's very different in terms of how you prioritize your water. And if you have it, do you save it or do you give it out? You know, that's something that we need to think about. We also talked about evaporation and the effects that has, and Utah Lake losing, what was the number? What did you say? Yeah, so this huge amount, and 1,000 CFS.
This time of year.
Yeah, so that's that's a problem that that people talk about, but without a lot of solutions, maybe, that we have to continue to brainstorm. What else is there? I think that pretty well covers it. We talked a lot about groundwater as well, and how that is a body of water that we need to keep an eye on. That not only as storage, but as something that we can rely on in the future, and we need to provide recharge for that.
We talked a bit about public perception, where the water distributors don't have the ability or the legal right to transfer water from one area to another, even if it's only 10, 15 miles apart. And people are going, well, why are they able to water and I'm getting cut back, and they live just down the road? And like I say, it's because of all the legal things that are in place, because of the transfers that are in place, which water districts have the control of the water, but the public perception becomes very negative under those situations.
Yeah. Anything else? I think that covers it.
Okay, our last group, and this is natural water. Oh, no, ag water. We already did natural, huh? Ag water.
Our first question was, how are agricultural water cutbacks managed? And in my part of the state, Mother Nature manages her cutbacks really well, and we take them and smile and enjoy them because there is no storage. So it depends on the part of the state. With ag cutbacks, because ag owns usually the oldest water in the state. They have those old priority dates. That's the reason Darren said there was an issue with ag guys going, we're not going to have a cutback. Because if you go on priority dates, usually ag doesn't have to have a priority cutback. But the other issue is, we talked about beneficial uses. And in the state of Utah, the highest beneficial use is for human consumption, culinary and waste management. So even though ag has the highest priority dates, lowest, oldest, it doesn't necessarily mean that that water can stay. If we, push comes to shove, if that water can go for human health, for the benefit of the population. Let's see. The other discussion, we talked about Utah Lake, and we do have a solution, and it was written in our notes that we should put a bubble over Utah Lake and collect that water that's evaporating, and we could have us a little tropical area, and that would mitigate that winter too, so that we could have a place to go, kind of like Hawaii in Utah County. Well, there's a discussion about building islands, but I look at that 1,000 CFS that's getting evaporated away every day, and if I had 5 of that CFS, I could water my farm. So I'm thinking a bubble over that, and we'll just collect it and recycle it, and but personally, I think that there has to be a change in management of Utah Lake because of the water loss and the need of water in the state of Utah. Everybody laughs about the islands and those things, but I think that the need for the water and the value of that water might determine that we do something different than what we think we can, and also that land that's available that could be developed for homes and everything, that growth, it could maybe pay for itself under the right conditions. So that's just philosophy of Jay, which doesn't really mean too much in the big picture of life. What else am I supposed to say? What else group did I forget that we're really worried about? We had quite a discussion on what ag is and consumptive use of water, because, we all hear ag has 80% of the water in the state of Utah, but what percent of water is consumptive use, and the rest of it really goes back into the natural environment. So there's some misnomers and misunderstanding on how ag uses water, and do we want ag in the state of Utah? We had that discussion. Do we need ag? Is it something that's of value? Ag provides 14% of the state's economy. That's generally not something that is discussed in Utah. Ag gets a really big budget on advertising from the state coffers. I think it's like 0, but what do we want? I think that's something that we have to discuss. Our water rights do tie us up. There is a discussion on water banking, in-stream flows, changing of water laws so that ag can see a benefit from conservation and other management. But, your term on conservation is always different depending on where you're talking. In ag, conservation is a completely different animal than it is on residential property. So we have a terminology problem, we have a misunderstanding problem, and we have opportunities. I think this drought management and mitigation is a good thing. I think it's several years behind where it should be, but what have I done to help? Diddly squat nothing, so we can't complain. Anything else you want to talk about? I think a reduction in population would be great. That's the reason I had 10 kids, but I mean, it is what it is. Utah has always had the benefit of working together. We've always come together, and we will solve this. It will hurt, and somebody will get shorted. And usually that's agriculture, and maybe a little bit of the natural system altogether. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I have enjoyed just the interaction. I have enjoyed the humor, the seriousness, and the lightheartedness of this group. And I just, again, appreciate your participation and being here. And thank you very much.